Best practices suck. By their very definition, best practices are average. And if you try and scale your business to your promised land, whether that's an 8-figure exit, whether that's 7 figures down the road, whatever result that you try to get that's exceptional, you're not going to get it by using best practices because they're average. And they're not exceptional and they won't get you anything long term that's lasting, nothing consistent, nothing predictable. So I recently read this book called The Great Mental Models by Shane Parrish of Farnham Street. It's a very, very good book. I would really recommend it. What's interesting about the book is the first time that I read it, it was really eye-opening, not because of the material in it. The material is fantastic, but it wasn't really that. It was because when I was reading it, when I started out in entrepreneurship and I started out in business, I would see these people online and they were talking about concepts that were so foreign to me and they just sounded so intelligent and so smart. And while I was reading it, I was like, wait a minute, these are just the people that sounded really smart. They just read this book, okay? And it's not like a staple in the business community. It's not really a staple in any community, but it makes these high-level thinking concepts and breaks them down into very easy to read chapters and shows you, like, I think it's 13 or 14 different models that you can use to give yourself an understanding of the world and how to think. And then you kind of mesh those together in what they call a lattice work of thinking concepts. And then you have that strong thinking platform to build off of. And so everybody who I see online that is talking smart and makes these smart videos, they just read this book. And it was really cool for me to see that because I was like, wait a minute, okay, these guys aren't geniuses. I can do this too. And it was really helpful for me and my confidence when I started out, and that's really why I'm where I'm at today, because my confidence increased, and so did my ability to understand and think because I read this book. So this book has done wonders for me, and it can do wonders for you. Now, my favorite part about this book is when they talk about best practices, okay? So Shane Parrish talks about best practices in a positive and a negative sense, okay? So because the best is not average, the best and average are not the same in this context. So when Shane talks about best practices, these are the best practices to get consistent results that people have gotten for years. Okay, best practices are the results that are going to get you the average of all of your competition using these same practices. Right? So those things where you go into a market and you go into an industry that they say, hey, here's how it's done, here's how it's always been done, here's how we do it. Right? Those are best practices, those are the fundamentals. Right? But by definition, they're average. And whatever results that you get through those best practices are going to be, the ceiling for those results is going to be the average of all of your competition that's using them and all of the people that have used them in the past, right? These are things that your customers are used to, that they understand, that they just add to their routine and they go through life and then that's it. And they're done, right? They don't have to really, there's no exceptionalism done with these best practices, right? These best practices don't evoke exceptional results, okay? There's no creativity, there's no innovation, nothing exceptional happening, right? Like I said. So you can grow your business using best practices, but your ceiling is going to be the average of your competition, right? Or honestly, it's going to be their worst day is going to be your best day. And you're never going to be able to get past them and get to that promised land that you're looking for by using these best practices, okay? So sometimes we got to break the rules. And best practices, they're going to get you off the ground. They're good for setting a foundation, but you're never going to get to that promised land like we talked about at the beginning, into a place of exceptional results, not to beat a dead horse, by using these best practices, right? They're never going to get you to that 8-figure exit that you're looking for, right? You're never going to get those consistent, predictable results that will scale you up if you just use these best practices that everybody else uses. And not only that, but you have zero competitive advantage. You have no leverage over your competition in the eyes of your customers. You're like everybody else in your market. And that means that you're never, no matter what you do, no matter what marketing piece you put out, no matter what technology you employ in your business, it's all going to be short term because your competition can just copy it, right? It's not difficult for them to copy what you're doing because you have no real lasting competitive advantage because you're just using the same techniques as they are, right? And the only thing that's really changing is your tactical approach, not your overall approach as far as what separates you from them. Okay, and that's what best practices do. They'll get you off the ground, but you're never going to be able to separate yourself from the pack and get that scale that's exceptional. Okay, so here's how I would play it. First, I would understand the fundamentals by learning these best practices. Learn what the best practices are in your industry, whatever they are, in terms of your customers, in terms of your team, however, whatever practice you're deploying these into, whether that's management for your team, whether that's marketing and advertising for your customers or retention or anything like that. Business growth as a whole, I would separate into one category. Finance, like accounting, stuff like that, I would separate into one category. Things like that, right? Those general principles of business, how do you apply those best practices to each of those of those principles, right? All of those disciplines are going to come with a different set of best practices, and understand that discipline using those best practices. But when you want to get exceptional results and you want to go forward, you've got to adapt those fundamentals, and you have to tailor them to the result that you want. So in the terms of marketing and advertising, it's all about the customers. It's all about what they respond to. So we're just going to adapt the fundamentals to pander to them, really. So we're going to take a theory and we're going to put that theory out there and let our customers tell us if they liked it or not, right? Whether that's a new product, whether that's a new piece of technology, whether that's a new promotion, whatever it is, we're going to put it out to market, and then our customers are going to say, oh, I like this by purchasing it or responding in a positive way. And if they don't, then we rework it again and we put it back out there. And we keep doing that until we finally get the result that they're looking for, that's going to get us the result that we're looking for, which is extreme scale. Okay? And that's all that we have to do, right? You constantly improve on the things that you're putting out to market, those things that you're executing on and giving to your customers. You have to take risks and you have to experiment if you want to get anything above average. Right? You can play with best practices and get average results for the rest of your life and constantly be hustling and constantly be grinding. But if you want to scale up, you've got to take risk and you have to experiment and tailor it to your customers. Everything is a science experiment about the customer. The customer is your market that you're putting things out to test to, right? What do they respond to the best? That's how we determine what works, what is good, and what to keep. And we remove everything else. And that is how we take best practices to get us from 0 to 500K, maybe, and then 500K to $4 million to an 8-figure exit. We have to constantly improve on those iterations of the best practice and tailor them to our customers. Tailor them to what they like and what works best for them and what works best for us, right? Work backwards from the goal that we're looking to get and then adjust those best practices for our business. That's how we get to that coveted 8-figure exit. Right? That promised land. So to scale your business using best practices, don't use them all the way through. Only use them about halfway. And then everything else you need to tailor to your customers.